The room smelled of antiseptic and wilted flowers. A bouquet of white lilies sat on the windowsill, their petals already beginning to brown at the edges, a gift from a neighbor who had probably meant well, but had chosen the one flower that made Elena's throat close up every time she looked at it. She had been in this hospital room for 36 hours now, and every inch of it felt like a cage. The pale blue curtains were drawn against the Atlanta afternoon, filtering the sunlight into a muted, jaundiced glow. The heart monitor beeped in a steady, rhythmic pulse that was supposed to be reassuring but only reminded her of how fragile everything truly was. Her body ached with a deep, bone weariness that sleep could not touch. She had pushed for 4 hours, screamed until her voice gave out, and then, finally, miraculously, there had been a cry. A thin, reedy wail that had cut through the haze of pain and exhaustion and filled her with a joy so sharp it felt like a blade. Her daughter. Her beautiful, perfect daughter. But Marcus had not held her. Elena shifted in the hospital bed, the stiff sheets rustling beneath her. Her gaze drifted to the bassinet beside her, where her daughter, Sophia, slept in a swaddle of pale pink cotton. The baby's face was scrunched in that peculiar way newborns had, as though she were still trying to make sense of the world she had been thrust into. A tiny fist curled against her cheek, and Elena felt her heart clench with a love so fierce it almost hurt. She had been dreaming of this moment for 9 months, dreaming of the way Marcus would look at their daughter, his eyes soft with wonder, his hands gentle as he cradled her for the first time. She had imagined him whispering promises to the baby, vows of protection and devotion that would bind them as a family. But when the nurse had placed Sophia in his arms, he had flinched. He had taken a step back, his jaw tightening, his eyes flickering with something Elena could not name. And then he had handed the baby back to the nurse, his movements stiff and abrupt. "I can't," he had said, his voice hollow. I need a moment." He had not come back. Not to hold Sophia. Not to stroke Elena's forehead and tell her she had done well. He had simply walked out of the room, his footsteps echoing down the corridor, and Elena had been left alone with her newborn daughter and a silence that pressed down on her like a weight. She had told herself it was shock. Fatherhood was a big adjustment. Men handled things differently. He would come around. He would see Sophia's tiny fingers curling around his thumb, and the walls around his heart would crumble. But he had not come around. He had not come back at all. Now, on the morning after the birth, Elena lay in her hospital bed and waited. The door was ajar, and she could hear the distant murmur of voices from the nurse's station, the clatter of a cart being wheeled down the hallway. The sounds of a world that continued to spin, indifferent to the fracture that was forming in her own, as she looked at her phone. No messages. No missed calls. She had texted Marcus 6 times. She had called 3 times and left voicemails that grew increasingly desperate. She had even sent a photograph of Sophia, her eyes half open, her lips pursed in a tiny pout. He had not responded. The door creaked, and Elena's heart leaped into her throat. But it was only a nurse, a young woman with kind eyes and a name tag that read Janelle. "How are you feeling, Mrs. Walsh?" Janelle asked, moving to the bassinet to check on Sophia. "She's a beautiful baby. Perfect health, by the way." Everything came back normal. "I'm fine," Elena said automatically.
She was not fine.
She was a tangle of exhaustion and anxiety, and something that felt terrifyingly like grief. "Has there been any word from my husband?" Janelle's smile faltered.
"No, Mrs. Walsh.
"But I'm sure he's just busy. You know how these things go. Sometimes the fathers just need a little time to process." Elena nodded, even though she did not believe a word of it. Marcus had never needed time to process anything. He had always been decisive, commanding, certain of his place in the world. He had negotiated multi-million-dollar contracts in less time than it took to boil water. He had decided to marry her after 3 dates and proposed within 6 months. He did not need time. He was avoiding her. "What time is visiting hours?" Elena asked, her voice carefully neutral. "You have a few hours yet, dear. But I'm sure your husband will be here soon." Janelle adjusted the blankets around Sophia and smiled. He wouldn't miss this for the world. Elena managed a tight smile in return. She wanted to believe it. She needed to believe it. Because the alternative, That Marcus had looked at his daughter and seen something he could not accept was a thought she could not bear to entertain. The hours crawled by. Elena passed the time by staring at Sophia, memorizing every detail of her daughter's face. The faint, feathery eyebrows. The small, perfect nose. The way her lips quivered when she dreamed. She was so tiny, so fragile, so utterly dependent on the love and care of the people around her. And one of those people, the person who was supposed to be her father, her protector, had refused to hold her. Elena's stomach churned with a mixture of anger and confusion. She had given Marcus everything. She had left behind her career, her friends, her entire life in Chicago, to build a future with him in Atlanta. She had endured the dismissive comments from his mother, who had never quite accepted that her son had married a woman from the Midwest. She had smiled through the dinner parties where his colleagues' wives had looked at her as though she were a curious artifact, something that had been dug up from a lesser social stratum. She had done it all because she loved him, because she believed that he loved her back. But now, in the pale, sterile light of the hospital room, she found herself wondering if she had been fooling herself all along. The door opened again at noon, and Elena sat up straighter, her heart pounding. But it was not Marcus. It was her mother-in-law, Clarissa Walsh, a woman whose perpetually pursed lips seemed to hold a lifetime of unspoken judgments. "Elena," Clarissa said, sweeping into the room in a cloud of expensive perfume. "I heard about the baby. Marcus called me this morning." "Marcus called you." Elena's voice was sharp, a little too sharp. "He hasn't called me. He hasn't been here since she was born." Clarissa's expression did not change. She approached the bassinet, her eyes flickering over Sophia with an unreadable intensity. "He's been very busy with the business, dear. The board meeting was scheduled months ago, and you know how important it is for him to be present. He missed the birth of his daughter for a board meeting." Elena's voice trembled with a mixture of fury and disbelief. "He didn't even hold her, Clarissa. He refused to touch her." Clarissa turned to face her, and for a moment, Elena saw something flicker in the older woman's eyes. Was it guilt? Was it pity? It was gone before she could name it, replaced by the familiar mask of cool, polished indifference. "Marcus has his reasons," Clarissa said. "I'm sure he'll explain everything when he's ready." "Why won't you tell me?" Elena demanded, her voice rising. "You know something. I can see it on your face. What is it? What's wrong with my baby?" "Nothing is wrong with her." Clarissa's voice was clipped, dismissive. "She's a perfectly healthy Walsh. But you have to understand, Elena, there are things about Marcus that you don't know. Things that I've tried to protect you from." Elena felt the room tilt. "What kind of things?" Clarissa hesitated. For a long, agonizing moment, she seemed to be wrestling with a decision. And then, just as abruptly, the mask slipped back into place. "You should focus on resting," she said. "I'll speak to Marcus tonight and have him call you. In the meantime, I'll see to it that the baby has everything she needs." "Don't you dare," Elena snapped, her voice cold and hard. "Don't you dare pretend to care about her when you and your son are keeping secrets from me. I am Sophia's mother. I have a right to know what is going on." Clarissa's eyes narrowed. "You have a right to nothing, Elena. You came into this family as an outsider, and you will always be an outsider. The sooner you accept that, the easier everything will be." She turned on her heel and walked out, leaving the door swinging in her wake. Elena sat in the silence, her hands shaking. She had never been more furious. She had never been more terrified. Later that evening, when the sun had dipped below the horizon and the room was bathed in the soft blue light of dusk, Marcus finally appeared. He looked haggard, his suit rumpled, his tie loosened. There were dark circles under his eyes, and when he walked into the room, he did not meet Elena's gaze. "Where have you been?" she demanded, her voice raw. "I had things to handle." He stopped at the foot of her bed, his hands shoved into his pockets. "Elena, we need to talk. Your mother was here earlier. She told me there are things I don't know about you." "What does she mean?" Marcus flinched. It was a small movement, barely perceptible, but Elena caught it. She had learned to read his micro-expressions over the years, and this was the expression of a man who had been cornered. "I didn't want to tell you like this," he said, his voice low. I thought I would have more time." "Tell me what?" Elena's voice was barely a whisper. Marcus took a deep breath. I was married before, Elena. Before you. And I had a daughter. The words hit her like a physical blow. She stared at him, her mind struggling to process. What are you talking about? Her name was Lily. She was born about 6 years before we met. I loved her. I loved her more than anything. His voice cracked, and he had to stop for a moment. She died, Elena, when she was 2 years old. I couldn't save her. There was an accident. It was my fault. Elena shook her head, her vision blurring. Why didn't you tell me all these years? You never said a word. Because I couldn't. His eyes were wet with unshed tears. Every time I thought about it, I couldn't breathe. And when I saw Sophia today, with her little face and her little hands, it all came flooding back. I saw Lily. I saw her and I panicked. I couldn't hold her. I couldn't even look at her. Elena wanted to be angry. She wanted to scream at him for his cruelty, his coldness, his refusal to even touch their daughter. But all she could see was the grief in his eyes, the raw, bottomless grief of a father who had lost a child. You should have told me, she said, her voice softer now. Marcus, we're supposed to be a team. You should have trusted me. I know. He sank into the chair beside her bed, his face buried in his hands. I know. I'm so sorry, Elena. I'm so sorry for everything. She reached out and placed her hand on his shoulder. It was not a gesture of forgiveness. It was not an absolution. It was simply an acknowledgement of the truth that lay between them. We'll get through this, she said. But you have to promise me something. You have to go to Sophia. You have to hold her and tell her that you love her. She is not Lily. She is her own person, and she deserves a father who is present, who is here. Marcus looked up at her, his eyes red-rimmed. What if I can't? What if you can? Elena countered. What if you let yourself love her, and you find that it's the most beautiful thing in the world? He was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, he rose from the chair and walked to the bassinet. He looked down at Sophia, his face a portrait of torment, and then, hesitantly, he reached out and touched her tiny hand. She stirred, her fingers curling around his thumb. And in that moment, something shifted in Marcus's expression. The fear, the grief, the paralysis, it all melted away, replaced by a dawning wonder. She's so small, he whispered. She's so perfect. Elena let out a breath she did not realize she had been holding.
She is.
And she's ours. Marcus bent down and pressed a gentle kiss to Sophia's forehead. It was a small gesture, but it felt monumental. It felt like a beginning, but as the night wore on, and Marcus slept fitfully in the chair beside her, Elena found herself unable to close her eyes. Something about Clarissa's words had lodged itself in her mind like a splinter. There are things about Marcus that you don't know, she had said. Things that I've tried to protect you from. Elena had dismissed it at the time, attributing it to her mother-in-law's usual venom. But now, with the silence of the hospital room pressing in around her, she could not stop thinking about it. What else was Marcus hiding? She picked up her phone and stared at the screen. She had not used this particular resource in years, but she remembered the address. A private investigator she had once hired for a background check on a business partner. A woman named Grace Hartley, who was known for her discretion.
Elena hesitated.
She did not want to suspect Marcus. She did not want to go behind his back. But she had learned, in the past few hours, that trust was a fragile thing. As she typed out a message. Grace, it's Elena Walsh. I need your help. It's urgent. She pressed send and set the phone aside, her heart racing. Somewhere in the distance, a baby cried. A door opened. A nurse's footsteps echoed down the hallway. Elena closed her eyes and tried to sleep, but in the back of her mind, a single thought burned like a beacon. What else was Marcus hiding, and what would happen when she finally found out the truth? The hospital discharged Elena and Sophia the following afternoon, and the drive home was a study in silence. Marcus sat in the driver's seat of his black SUV, his hands gripping the steering wheel with a white-knuckled tension that never quite loosened. Elena sat in the passenger seat with Sophia cradled against her chest, the baby's soft weight a grounding presence. She watched the Atlantis skyline slide past the window, the familiar towers of glass and steel, the sprawling suburbs, the neat rows of manicured lawns that signaled their approach to the gated community where they lived. She should have felt relief. She was going home. She had her daughter, her husband, her beautiful house with its marble floors and floor-to-ceiling windows. Everything she had ever wanted was right there, waiting for her, but something had shifted. A fissure had opened in the foundation of her marriage, and she could not pretend it did not exist. Marcus had not spoken more than a dozen words since they left the hospital. He had carried Sophia's car seat to the car with a reverence that bordered on mechanical, and he had fastened it into the base with meticulous care. But his face had been blank, his movements stiff. He had not looked at the baby. He had not looked at Elena. She told herself it was grief. He had lost a child. He was processing that trauma, and he needed time. She had read somewhere that men handled emotional pain differently. They retreated into themselves, built walls, waited until they felt safe enough to break down. But as they pulled into the driveway of their 6-bedroom home, Elena caught a glimpse of something in Marcus's expression that made her stomach clench. It was not grief she saw, it was dread. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice careful. "We don't have to talk about anything right now. We can just settle in. Get Sophia comfortable." "Fine," Marcus said, cutting the engine. "I'll get the bags." He got out of the car without looking at her, and Elena watched him walk around to the trunk. His shoulders were tight, his jaw set. He was a man under siege, and she did not know who the enemy was. The house felt different now. It had always been a showpiece, Marcus's trophy, a testament to his success and his taste. Elena had decorated it herself, pouring months of effort into choosing the right fabrics, the right colors, the right art. She had thought she was building a home. Now, standing in the foyer with Sophia in her arms, she felt like an interloper. The nursery was on the second floor, a room she had spent weeks preparing. The walls were a soft, pale lavender, and the crib was a gleaming white with a mobile of delicate butterflies suspended above it. The changing table was stocked with diapers and wipes, the closet filled with tiny dresses and onesies and sleep sacks. Everything was perfect except for the fact that Marcus had not stepped foot in the room since she had finished it. "Sophia's room is ready," she said, turning to him as he carried the bags through the front door. "Would you like to see it? I thought maybe we could put her down for a nap together."
He froze.
She saw it happen, the sudden rigidity in his spine, the way his gaze skittered away from hers. "Later," he said. "I have calls to make. The office has been piling up since I took leave." "Marcus." She said his name softly, but it landed like a blow. "We just brought our daughter home. You can't just walk away." "I'm not walking away." His voice was clipped. "I'm trying to keep things running. Someone has to pay the bills around here." Elena felt the barb land. He had never thrown money in her face before, but there was a subtext in his words that cut deep. "You don't work. You don't contribute. You don't have a right to demand anything from me." She bit her tongue. It was not the time. She was exhausted, her body still healing from labor, and she knew that pushing him now would only make things worse. "Fine," she said, turning toward the stairs. "I'll put her down myself. But we need to talk."
Soon.
"Not later." "Soon." She did not wait for his response. Sophia was a dream. She nursed easily, slept peacefully, and made the soft, snuffling sounds that Elena had read about in parenting books but had never truly understood. The love she felt for this tiny creature was consuming, all-encompassing, and it made the tension in the house bearable. But it did not make it disappear. Over the next few days, Marcus became a ghost in his own home. He left for work before dawn and returned after Sophia had been put to bed. He took his meals in the study, claiming that he had too much to do to sit down. He did not ask how the baby was sleeping. He did not ask how Elena was recovering. He simply existed on the periphery of her life, a silent presence that offered nothing and asked for nothing. Elena tried to give him space. She told herself that he needed time, that the memory of Lily was still too raw, that he would come around when he was ready. But the days stretched into a week and then 2, and then 3, and nothing changed. She began to notice small things. The way he flinched when Sophia cried. The way he averted his eyes when she handed him a photograph of their daughter. The way he never, ever said her name. The first real crack appeared on a Thursday afternoon. Elena was in the living room, nursing Sophia, when she heard Marcus's car pull into the driveway. She tensed, as she had learned to do, bracing herself for the cold silence that would follow. But this time, she heard something else, the sound of voices. Marcus was not alone. She heard the front door open, heard Marcus's low, measured tones, and then a second voice, a woman's voice, sharp and familiar. Clarissa. Elena's chest tightened. She had not spoken to her mother-in-law since the hospital, and she had no desire to renew that acquaintance. But before she could retreat to the nursery, Clarissa was already in the doorway, her eyes gleaming with the same cold, calculating intensity she had worn in the hospital room. "Elena," Clarissa said, her voice a silken blade. "I'm so glad to see her settling in. The baby looks healthy." "She is healthy," Elena replied, her voice flat. "She's perfect, actually. Would you like to hold her?" Clarissa's smile flickered. "Perhaps later. I'm here to speak with Marcus. There are matters to discuss." Matters. There was always something to discuss, always some crisis that Clarissa needed to solve. She had run Marcus's life since he was a boy, and she had never quite let go of the reins. "Marcus is in the study," Elena said. "You know the way." Clarissa's gaze lingered on Sophia for a moment too long. Something shifted in her expression, a flicker of something that looked almost like fear. And then she was gone, her heels clicking against the marble floor as she strode toward the study. Elena watched her go, a chill creeping down her spine. She should not have listened. She knew that. But the door to the study was ajar, and Clarissa's voice carried. "She looks just like her, Marcus. You know that. Everyone is going to notice." Elena heard Marcus's response, low and muffled. She could not make out the words, but the tone was defensive, angry. "You have to tell her," Clarissa hissed. "Before someone else does. The longer you wait, the worse it will be. That woman deserves the truth." "I can't." Marcus's voice was a raw, ragged whisper. "You don't understand what it was like. What I did. If she knows, she'll leave me. She'll take Sophia, and she'll leave. She's going to find out eventually. These things always come to light. And when she does, she will hate you for lying to her. Do you want that? Do you want her to hate you?" There was a long pause. Then Marcus said, in a voice that was almost too quiet to hear, "It was my fault. All of it. I killed Lily. I killed her, and if Elena finds out, she'll never forgive me." Elena felt the blood drain from her face. She stumbled back from the door, her heart pounding. Her mind was a whirlwind of fragments. Clarissa's warning, Marcus's confession, the implication that there was more to Lily's death than a tragic accident. She backed away from the study, her steps silent on the marble floor, and retreated to the nursery. She closed the door behind her and leaned against it, her breath coming in short, shallow gasps. Sophia lay in her crib, her tiny chest rising and falling in peaceful slumber. Elena looked at her daughter and felt a wave of protectiveness so fierce it almost choked her. She had trusted Marcus. She had believed him when he told her he was simply grieving. But now, she knew there was more to the story. Something dark, something buried so deep that he would rather let his marriage crumble than let it see the light of day. She picked up her phone and opened her messages. There was still no response from Grace Hartley, but she had not given up hope. She typed a new message. "I need to know everything about Marcus's past. His first marriage.
His daughter.
The accident. I need the truth, Grace. Whatever it takes." She sent the message and set the phone aside, her hands trembling. Outside, the sun was setting over Atlanta, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. It was beautiful, almost unbearably so. But Elena could not bring herself to look at it. Her eyes were fixed on Sophia, and the only thought in her mind was a promise she had made herself. "I will protect you, no matter what it costs. No matter who I have to fight." She did not know what Marcus was hiding. She did not know what Clarissa knew. But she was going to find out. And when she did, nothing would ever be the same. The days that followed Clarissa's visit were a study in controlled chaos. Elena moved through the motions of early motherhood. The feedings, the diaper changes, the sleepless nights, with a mechanical precision that masked the turmoil churning beneath her surface. She smiled at the right moments. She cooed over Sophia's tiny fingers and toes. She sent cheerful updates to the group chat with her college friends and posted carefully curated photographs of the nursery on social media. Everything looked perfect. Everything looked peaceful. But inside, she was a storm, and Marcus had retreated further into his fortress of silence. He came home later and later, sometimes after midnight, smelling of whiskey and expensive cologne. He ate dinner in the study, his eyes fixed on his laptop screen, and he slept in the guest room without ever offering an explanation. Elena had stopped asking. What was the point? Every question was met with a wall of stone, and she was too tired, too raw, too consumed by her own suspicions to fight through it. But she was not idle. In the quiet hours between feedings, when Sophia slept and the house settled into its nighttime stillness, Elena did her research. She started with the obvious. A Google search for Marcus Walsh yielded the expected results: articles about his business successes, profiles in Atlanta's elite magazines, mentions of his philanthropic work and his position on various corporate boards. There was nothing about a first marriage, nothing about a daughter, nothing about a tragic accident that had ended a child's life. She tried variations. Marcus Walsh, daughter Lily. Marcus Walsh, child death. Walsh family tragedy, Atlanta. Still nothing. It was as if the whole thing had been scrubbed from the internet, erased with the kind of precision that only money and influence could buy. Elena sat in the nursery, her laptop balanced on her knees, and stared at the screen. The blue glow illuminated her face, casting shadows that made her look older, wearier. Sophia slept in the bassinet beside her, her tiny chest rising and falling in the steady rhythm of innocence. She had been so naive. She had believed Marcus when he said he loved her. She had believed him when he said he wanted a family. She had never questioned the gaps in his story, the moments when his eyes would go distant and his answers would become vague. She had trusted him completely. And he had betrayed that trust in ways she was only beginning to understand. Her phone buzzed, and she nearly jumped. The screen lit up with a number she did not recognize. "Hello," she answered, her voice barely above a whisper. Elena Walsh, the voice on the other end, was crisp, professional. "This is Grace Hartley. I received your messages. I apologize for the delay. I've been out of the country on another case." Elena's heart slammed against her ribs. "Thank you for calling back. I need your help. I need to know the truth about my husband's past." "Marcus Walsh," Grace said, her tone carefully neutral. "I've done some preliminary digging since I got your messages. There's a lot to unpack, and I want to be upfront with you. Some of what I found is unsettling." "I don't care," Elena said, her voice hardening. "I need to know everything, whatever it costs. I'll pay whatever you ask. I'm not worried about the money." Grace paused. "Are you sure you're ready for this once I tell you what I know? There's no going back." Elena looked at Sophia. She thought about the words she had overheard in the study. She thought about the way Marcus had refused to touch his own daughter, the terror in his eyes when he looked at her. "I've never been more sure of anything," she said. Grace arrived at the house the following afternoon, dressed in a tailored blazer and carrying a leather briefcase that looked heavy enough to contain the secrets of the world. Elena led her to the sunroom, a glass-walled space at the back of the house that overlooked the garden. It was the one room where she felt she could breathe, where the suffocating presence of Marcus's silence seemed to recede. Sophia was asleep in a portable bassinet at Elena's feet. Grace set her briefcase on the table and opened it, revealing a thick folder stuffed with documents. "Before I show you anything," Grace began, "I need you to understand that this case is complicated. Marcus Walsh is a powerful man with powerful connections. He's spent years covering his tracks. What I've uncovered is just the tip of the iceberg, but it's enough to give you a picture of what you're dealing with." Elena nodded, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Grace pulled out a photograph and slid it across the table. It was a picture of a young woman with dark hair and a shy smile, her arm wrapped around a baby girl who could not have been more than a year old. "Amelia Chun," Grace said, "Marcus's first wife. They were married for 3 years, and they had a daughter, Lily." The marriage was troubled from the start. Amelia was an artist, a free spirit, and Marcus tried to mold her into something she wasn't. He was controlling, possessive, emotionally abusive. Elena felt her stomach drop. She had known Marcus could be cold. She had experienced his cruelty firsthand. But to hear it laid out so plainly, so clinically, was something else entirely. What happened to her? She asked, her voice barely audible. Grace's expression darkened. She died in a car accident when Lily was 2 years old. Marcus was driving. According to the police report, he lost control of the vehicle on a rainy night. Amelia was pronounced dead at the scene. Lily survived with minor injuries.
À car accident, Elena repeated.
But Marcus told me it was his fault. He said he killed Lily. He said he couldn't save her. Grace nodded slowly. That's where it gets complicated. Because the police report doesn't tell the whole story. I spoke to a witness, someone who was at the hospital the night of the accident. They told me that Marcus was arrested for DUI. His blood alcohol level was over the legal limit, but the charges were dropped. The case was sealed. And within a year, he had remarried and moved to Atlanta, as if none of it had ever happened. Elena felt the room tilt. She gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white. He was drunk. He drove drunk with his wife and child in the car. That's the allegation. But without access to the sealed records, I can't confirm it. What I can confirm is that Marcus's family used their influence to make the problem disappear. His mother, Clarissa, is a formidable woman. She has connections in the legal system that run very deep. She made sure the DUI charge never saw the light of day. Elena thought about Clarissa's cold, calculating eyes. She thought about the way her mother-in-law had warned her, had tried to protect her from the truth. It wasn't kindness that motivated her. It was self-preservation. Clarissa was protecting her son, her family's name, her carefully constructed world of wealth and power. Where is Lily now? Elena asked. Is she still alive? Grace hesitated. It was a small pause, barely a heartbeat, but Elena caught it. That's the thing, Grace said slowly. According to public records, Lily died from complications related to the accident. But I've been digging into her medical records, and something doesn't add up. The timeline is off. The documentation is spotty. It's almost as if what? Elena leaned forward, her heart pounding, as if Lily never died at all. The words hung in the air, heavy and impossible. Elena stared at Grace, her mind refusing to process. You're saying she's alive, that Marcus lied to me. I'm saying that there's a strong possibility that Lily Walsh is still alive, living under a different name, in a location that's been carefully hidden. I haven't been able to confirm it yet, but I'm close. I have a lead on a woman in Oregon who matches her description. Age, appearance, medical history. I'm following up on it now. Elena felt the tears come, unbidden and hot. She had been so focused on her own pain, her own betrayal, that she had not stopped to consider what Marcus's lies had cost Lily. A little girl who had lost her mother, who had been erased from existence by a father who could not face what he had done. Why would he do that? She whispered. Why would he pretend she was dead? Grace's gaze was steady, unwavering. Because it was easier. Easier to bury the past than to face it. Easier to start over with a new wife and a new child than to take responsibility for what he did. Marcus Walsh is a man who has built his life on lies. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Elena looked at Sophia, still sleeping peacefully in her bassinet. Her daughter was innocent. Her daughter was pure. She deserved a life free from the shadows of her father's sins. I'm going to find Lily, Elena said, her voice trembling but resolute. I'm going to bring her home. And then I'm going to make sure Marcus pays for every single thing he's done. The next morning, Elena confronted Marcus. She waited until he had showered and dressed, until he was standing in the kitchen with a cup of coffee in his hand, his briefcase at his feet, ready to flee to the safety of his office. Lily is alive, she said. It was not a question. It was a statement, cold and undeniable. Marcus froze. The coffee cup slipped from his fingers and shattered against the marble floor, dark liquid pooling at his feet. He did not move.
He did not speak.
He just stood there, his face a mask of shock and something that looked terrifyingly like guilt. Don't, she said, holding up her hand before he could speak. Don't lie to me. Don't try to explain it away. I know everything. The accident, the DUI, the sealed records. And I know that Lily is out there somewhere, living under a different name, because you couldn't face the truth. You told me she was dead. You let me believe that you were grieving a child you had lost. But it was all a lie, wasn't it? Everything was a lie. Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, in a voice that was barely a whisper, he asked, "How did you find out?" "It doesn't matter how I found out," Elena said. "What matters is that I know. And I am going to find her. I am going to bring her back. And when I do, I'm going to make sure everyone knows what you did." "You can't do that." His voice cracked, desperate and raw. "Please, Elena. You don't understand. I was young. I was stupid. I made a terrible mistake, but I've spent my entire life trying to make up for it. Please, don't destroy everything I've built." "You destroyed it yourself," Elena said, her voice flat. "The moment you chose to lie, the moment you chose to run, you destroyed it. I'm just here to clean up the mess." She turned and walked out of the kitchen, her footsteps steady, her spine straight. She did not look back, but as she climbed the stairs to the nursery, she heard Marcus's voice behind her, broken and weeping. "Please," he said. "Please don't take her from me. She's all I have left." Elena paused on the landing. She did not turn around. She did not need to. "Sophia is not yours," she said, her voice cold and final. "She's mine. And if you want any chance of being in her life, you will tell me where Lily is. You will help me find her. Or, I swear to God, Marcus, I will burn everything you have to the ground." She walked into the nursery and closed the door behind her. Sophia was awake, her eyes blinking up at the mobile of butterflies. Elena lifted her daughter into her arms and held her close, breathing in the sweet, powdery scent of her skin. She had a daughter to find. And a husband to destroy. The house was a mausoleum in the days that followed Elena's confrontation with Marcus. He did not go to work. He did not retreat to his study. He simply existed, a hollow shell of a man who shuffled through the hallways with the vacant stare of someone who had been gutted from the inside. He ate nothing. He said nothing. He sat in the living room for hours, staring at the wall, his hands limp in his lap. Elena watched him with a mixture of contempt and something that felt dangerously like pity. She had loved this man. She had built a life with him. And now, looking at the wreckage he had become, she could not help but wonder if she had ever really known him at all. But she did not have time to dwell on his misery. She had a daughter to find. Grace Hartley had sent her a file the night before, a dossier on the woman in Oregon. Her name was Eleanor Vance, and she lived in a small town called Ashland, a picturesque community nestled in the foothills of the Cascade Mountains. According to the records Grace had unearthed, Eleanor had been adopted by a couple named Robert and Margaret Vance when she was 3 years old. She had grown up in Oregon, attended the local high school, and now worked as a librarian in the town's public library. She was 24 years old. She had brown hair and green eyes and a smile that, in the one photograph Grace had been able to obtain, looked achingly familiar to Lily Walsh.
Alive. Whole.
Unaware that her father had erased her from existence, Elena stared at the photograph for a long time. The woman in the image was a stranger, but there was something in the tilt of her chin, the curve of her mouth, that reminded her of Marcus. The same defiant set of the jaw, the same spark of intelligence in her eyes. She had a right to know the truth. She had a right to know who she really was. Elena made her decision. She booked a flight to Oregon for the following morning. She packed a small bag, just enough for a few days, and arranged for a nanny to care for Sophia while she was gone. The nanny, a young woman named Rachel, had been recommended by a neighbor and came with impeccable references. Elena trusted her. She had to. Marcus was in the living room when she came down with her suitcase. He looked up at her, his eyes red-rimmed and pleading. "Where are you going?" he asked, his voice rough. "To find Lily," Elena said. "To bring her home." He rose from his chair, his hands outstretched. "Elena, please. Don't do this. I'll tell you anything you want to know. I'll give you anything you want. Just please, don't go to her. Don't drag her into this." "She's already in this," Elena said coldly. She's been in this her entire life. You just chose to pretend she didn't exist. She's better off without me, Marcus said, his voice breaking. She's happy. She has a family. She doesn't need to know about the lies, the mistakes, Her mother is dead, Marcus. Elena's voice was sharp, cutting. She died because you were too drunk to drive. Lily deserves to know the truth about what happened. She deserves to know who she really is. And if you try to stop me, if you try to interfere in any way, I will make sure that everyone knows exactly what you did. The board members, the investors, the press. I will destroy everything you have left. Marcus sank back into his chair, his face ashen. He did not try to stop her. The flight to Oregon was long and turbulent, both literally and figuratively. Elena stared out the window at the clouds below, her mind churning with 1,000 thoughts. She thought about Sophia, about the tiny life she had left behind in the care of a virtual stranger. She thought about Marcus, about the man she had once loved and now despised. And she thought about Lily, Eleanor, a woman who had no idea that her entire life was a lie. What would she say when she arrived? How would she explain the impossible? She could not simply walk up to a stranger and say, "I think your father is my husband, and I think you were raised under a false identity." It was absurd. It was insane. And yet, it was the truth. The plane landed in Medford, and Elena rented a car. The drive to Ashland took about 20 minutes, winding through the lush green hills of southern Oregon. The town was charming, exactly as Grace had described it. Quaint storefronts, tree-lined streets, a sense of quiet contentment that felt a world away from the polished, sterile luxury of Atlanta. She found the library easily. It was a small brick building with a sign that read, Ashland Public Library, in cheerful, hand-painted letters. Elena parked across the street and sat in the car for a long moment, her hands gripping the steering wheel. This was it. This was the moment she had been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. She got out of the car and walked across the street. The library door swung open, and a bell chimed above her head. The interior was warm and inviting, filled with the soft scent of old paper and wood polish. Sunlight streamed through the windows, casting golden rectangles on the worn carpet. At the front desk, a young woman was sorting through a stack of books. She had brown hair pulled back in a loose ponytail, green eyes framed by wire-rimmed glasses, and a smile that was warm and open. Eleanor Vance. Elena's heart slammed against her ribs. She forced herself to walk forward, to keep her voice steady. "Excuse me," she said. "I'm looking for someone. I was told that Eleanor Vance works here." The woman looked up, her smile dimming slightly at the sight of Elena's strained expression. "That's me. Can I help you with something?" Elena opened her mouth, and the words that came out were not the ones she had rehearsed. "My name is Elena Walsh," she said. "I'm looking for Lily. Lily Walsh. I think you might be her." The woman's face went pale. She took a step back, her hand gripping the edge of the desk. "I don't know what you're talking about. My name is Eleanor. I've lived in Ashland my whole life." "I know you have," Elena said gently. "But I need to tell you something. Something about your past. About the people you came from." Eleanor shook her head, her eyes wide with fear. I can't." "Please," Elena said. "Just give me 10 minutes. If you still want me to leave after that, I will. I promise." Eleanor's gaze flickered to the door, as if weighing her options. Then slowly she nodded. "There's a coffee shop next door," she said. "We can talk there." The coffee shop was quiet, nearly empty at this hour. Elena and Eleanor sat across from each other at a small table, steaming mugs in front of them. Eleanor's hands trembled slightly as she wrapped them around her cup. "Start from the beginning," Eleanor said. "Tell me everything." So Elena did. She told Eleanor about Marcus, about the marriage, about the lies he had told. She told her about the accident, the DUI, the sealed records. She told her about Grace Hartley's investigation and the discovery that Lily Walsh had been reported dead but had, in fact, been adopted by a couple in Oregon under a new identity. Eleanor listened in silence, her face growing paler with each word. By the time Elena finished, there were tears streaming down her cheeks. "I don't understand," she said, her voice trembling. "My parents, they told me I was adopted. But they always said my birth parents were young, that they couldn't take care of me. They never mentioned a car accident. They never mentioned that my mother died. They might not have known, Elena said gently. The adoption was private, and it was arranged by Marcus's family. They wanted to keep you hidden, to make sure that no one connected you to what happened. Eleanor was silent for a long moment. Then she looked up, and there was a hardness in her eyes that had not been there before. So my father, she said, her voice cold. My father killed my mother. He was drunk. He caused an accident that killed her and nearly killed me. And then he lied and he covered it up and he just forgot about me. He didn't forget about you, Elena said. He was haunted by you. He refused to even hold our daughter because it reminded him of you. Eleanor let out a bitter laugh. And that's supposed to make me feel better? No, Elena said. It's not. I just want you to know the truth. I want you to know that you are not forgotten. That there are people in this world who want to know you, who want to love you. Eleanor met her gaze. Why are you here? Why do you care? Elena thought about Sophia. She thought about the daughter she had left behind, the daughter she was fighting to protect. Because I know what it's like to be erased, she said. I know what it's like to be made invisible by someone who claims to love you. And I couldn't stand by and let it happen to you. Eleanor looked down at her hands. When she spoke again, her voice was soft. I don't know who I am anymore, she said. All my life, I thought I was Eleanor Vance. But now I don't know anything. You are Eleanor Vance, Elena said firmly. You are also Lily Walsh. You are both. And that's okay. You get to decide who you want to be. Eleanor looked up, and in her eyes, Elena saw a spark of something that looked almost like hope. What do I do now? She asked. Elena smiled. It was the first genuine smile she had felt in weeks. Now, she said, we figure it out together. They talked for hours. Eleanor told Elena about her life in Ashland, her parents, her childhood, her friends. She told her about her love of books, her job at the library, her quiet, contented existence that had been shattered by the revelation of the truth. Elena listened, and in listening, she found herself growing fonder of this young woman with each passing minute. Eleanor was kind, thoughtful, and fiercely intelligent. She had a strength that had been forged in the quiet adversity of being an adopted child who had always wondered about her origins, and she was determined to meet Marcus. I need to see him, Eleanor said. I need to look him in the eye and ask him why he did it. Why he lied. Why he pretended I was dead. He'll try to manipulate you, Elena warned. He's very good at that. I know. Eleanor's jaw set with the same defiant tilt Elena had seen in Marcus. But I'm not a little girl anymore. I can handle him.
Elena nodded.
She believed her. The flight back to Atlanta was different. This time, Eleanor sat beside her, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her gaze fixed on the window. She was nervous. Elena could see it in the tightness around her eyes, the way she kept chewing her lower lip. But she was also determined. And that determination gave Elena hope. When they arrived at the house, Marcus was waiting in the living room. He looked older than he had when Elena left, haggard, worn, a shadow of the man he had been. He rose to his feet when he saw them, his eyes fixed on Eleanor with a desperation that bordered on obsession. Lily, he breathed. My Lily. Eleanor stepped forward, her expression cold. Don't call me that, she said. My name is Eleanor, and I'm here to tell you that I know everything. Marcus's face crumpled. He sank to his knees, his hands outstretched. I'm sorry, he sobbed. I'm so sorry. I was young, I was scared. I made a terrible mistake. But I've never stopped loving you. I've never stopped thinking about you. Then why did you pretend I was dead? Eleanor's voice was sharp, cutting. Why did you leave me? Why did you lie? Marcus had no answer. He just knelt there, weeping, a pathetic shell of a man who had finally been forced to confront the truth. Elena watched. She felt no pity. She felt no forgiveness. She only felt relief, because the truth was out at last. And no matter what happened next, she knew that she had done the right thing. She had brought Lily home. The morning light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the living room, casting long, golden rectangles across the marble floor. Elena stood by the window, her arms crossed over her chest, watching the scene unfold before her with the detached clarity of a woman who had finally stopped running. Marcus was still on his knees, his shoulders shaking with sobs that had long since lost their theatrical edge. Eleanor Lily stood a few feet away from him, her posture rigid, her face a mask of controlled fury. The silence in the room was suffocating. It pressed against Elena's ears like the weight of deep water, and she found herself holding her breath, waiting for the inevitable explosion that would shatter the fragile stillness. It came, but not in the way she expected. Eleanor stepped forward, her footsteps deliberate and measured. She stopped in front of Marcus and looked down at him, her green eyes cold and hard. "You don't get to cry," she said, her voice low and steady. "You don't get to kneel there and weep like you're the victim in all of this. You killed my mother. You nearly killed me. And then you buried us both under a mountain of lies, so you could start over without the mess." Marcus looked up at her, his face blotchy and tear-streaked. "I loved your mother," he choked out. "I loved her so much. And when she died, when I realized what I had done, I couldn't face it. I couldn't face what I had become." "So you ran," Eleanor said. "You ran, and you hid, and you let me believe that I was someone else. You let me grow up without a father, without a history, without any idea of who I really was." "I thought I was protecting you," Marcus said, his voice breaking. "I thought if you didn't know, if you could just have a normal life." "Don't," Eleanor cut him off, her voice sharp as a blade. "Don't pretend you did any of this for me. You did it for yourself. You did it to save your reputation, your business, your precious Walsh name.
You didn't care about me.
You didn't care about anyone but yourself." Marcus opened his mouth to respond, but the words died in his throat. He looked at his daughter, really looked at her, and Elena saw something shift in his expression. It was not remorse. It was not guilt. It was something far more primal, the realization that he had lost her forever. Eleanor turned away from him and walked to the window where Elena stood. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Eleanor said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I don't know what to do now. I don't know who I am." Elena reached out and took her hand. "You're Lily Walsh," she said. "But you're also Eleanor Vance. You're the woman who survived. You're the woman who walked into this room and faced the man who destroyed your family. That takes more courage than most people will ever have." Eleanor squeezed her hand, and a single tear slipped down her cheek. "What about him?" she asked, nodding toward Marcus. Elena looked at her husband, her soon-to-be ex-husband. She corrected herself. He was still on his knees, his head bowed, his entire body trembling. He looked pathetic, broken, utterly defeated, but she felt no pity. She had spent too many years feeling sorry for him, making excuses for his cruelty, convincing herself that she could fix him if she just loved him hard enough. She knew better now. She had learned that some people were beyond saving, that some wounds were too deep to heal, and that sometimes the only way to survive was to walk away. "I don't know," Elena said honestly. "That's not my decision to make. But I know one thing. He's not going to control either of us anymore. Not you, not me, not Sophia. That part of our lives is over." Eleanor nodded slowly. She turned back to face Marcus, and for a long moment, she just stood there, looking at him. Then she took a deep breath and said, "I'm not going to press charges. I'm not going to sue you. I'm not going to do anything that drags this out and makes my life more complicated than it already is. But I want you to understand something. You are nothing to me. You are a stranger. A stranger who happens to share my DNA. And I never want to see you again." Marcus looked up at her, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Lily, please. My name is Eleanor," she said, cutting him off. "And I'm done." She walked out of the room without looking back. Elena followed her, her heart pounding with a strange, exhilarated sense of freedom. The next few weeks were a blur of legal proceedings and emotional upheaval. Elena filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences and emotional abuse. Marcus tried to fight it, but his lawyers advised him to settle quietly, to avoid further scandal. He agreed to a generous settlement, enough to allow Elena to live comfortably, to provide for Sophia, and to ensure that she never had to rely on him again. Eleanor stayed in Atlanta for a while, staying in the guest room of Elena's house. She spent time with Sophia, marveling at the tiny baby who was, in some strange way, her half-sister. She visited the places where her mother had lived, walked the streets where Amelia Chin had once walked, and tried to piece together a picture of the woman she had never known, and she began to write. She started a journal, filling its pages with her thoughts and feelings, her memories and her fears. It was a way to process, a way to make sense of the chaos that had been unleashed in her life. One evening, Elena found her in the living room, the journal open on her lap. She was staring out the window at the sunset, her face peaceful in the golden light. "Are you okay?" Elena asked, sitting down beside her. Eleanor smiled. It was a small smile, tentative and fragile, but it was real. "I think I am," she said. "I don't have all the answers. I don't know who I'm going to be, or what my life is going to look like. But for the first time in a long time, I feel like I have a future." Elena reached out and took her hand. "You do," she said. "And whatever that future looks like, you're not going to face it alone." A few weeks later, Elena received a letter from Marcus. It was hand-delivered, sealed with wax, and addressed in his careful, precise handwriting. She debated whether to open it, but curiosity got the better of her. The letter was short. It read, "Elena, I know you have every reason to hate me. I know I've done terrible things, and I know that I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I want you to know that I am sorry. I am sorry for the lies, the manipulation, the years of making you feel small. I am sorry for what I did to Lily. I am sorry for the way I treated you and Sophia. I am trying to get help. I am trying to change. I don't know if I can, but I want to try. I hope one day you might be able to forgive me. Not for my sake, but for yours. Because carrying all that anger and pain is a heavy burden, and you deserve to be free of it. I love you, Elena. I always have. I just didn't know how to show it.
Goodbye."
Elena read the letter twice. Then she folded it neatly and placed it in a drawer. She did not respond. She did not know if she would ever be able to forgive him. But she understood, for the first time, that forgiveness was not about him. It was about her. It was about letting go of the weight of the past, about choosing to move forward instead of remaining trapped in the pain of what had been. The last scene of the story took place in the nursery. It was late evening, and Sophia was asleep in her crib, her tiny chest rising and falling in the soft rhythm of infancy. Elena sat in the rocking chair beside the crib, her eyes fixed on her daughter's face. The mobile of butterflies spun slowly above the crib, casting shifting shadows across the walls. Eleanor stood in the doorway, watching. She had decided to move back to Oregon, to rebuild her life in the place she had always called home. But she had wanted to say goodbye first. "I'm going to miss this," Eleanor said softly. "Miss you. Miss her." Elena looked up at her and smiled. "You can visit any time. And I'll come to Oregon, too. We're family now. That doesn't change just because you live across the country." Eleanor walked into the room and knelt beside the rocking chair. She reached out and brushed a finger against Sophia's cheek, her touch feather-light. "She's so beautiful," Eleanor said. "She looks like you."
Elena Lauget.
"She has her father's eyes, I think. But I'm hoping she'll grow out of it." Eleanor laughed, too, a genuine, warm sound that filled the room with light. It was the first time Elena had heard her laugh like that, free of the weight of the past. "What are you going to tell her?" Eleanor asked. "When she's older. About her father. About all of this." Elena was quiet for a moment. She thought about the question, really thought about it, and she realized that she didn't have a clear answer. The future was uncertain. There were so many things she could not control, so many variables she could not predict. But she knew one thing for certain. "I'm going to tell her the truth," Elena said. "All of it. The good and the bad. I'm going to tell her that people are complicated, that they make mistakes, that they hurt the people they love. But I'm also going to tell her that she is strong, that she can survive anything, that she is loved." Eleanor nodded slowly. "That sounds like a good plan." Elena looked at her daughter, then at the young woman who had been given a second chance at life. She thought about the journey she had been on, the pain, the betrayal, the long, hard road to healing. It had been the most difficult thing she had ever done, but it had also been the most worthwhile. She reached out and took Eleanor's hand.
Thank you, she said.
For trusting me, for giving me a chance. Eleanor squeezed her hand. Thank you for finding me, she said, for not giving up. They sat together in the quiet of the nursery, watching the butterflies spin and the shadows shift. And in that moment, Elena felt something she had not felt in a long time. She felt peace. The journey had not been easy. There had been so many moments of doubt, so many nights when she had wondered if she would ever find her way out of the darkness. But she had made it. She had fought for herself, for her daughter, for the family she had built from the ashes of the one that had been stolen from her. And as she looked at Eleanor, at the future that stretched out before them, she knew that whatever came next, she would face it with the same fierce determination that had carried her through the storm. She was no longer the woman who had stood in a hospital room and watched her husband refuse to hold their child. She was no longer the woman who had been silenced and diminished and made to feel invisible. She was Elena Walsh. She was a mother. She was a survivor. And she was just getting started.